Lauren Boebert, the GOP's representative, beat up another witness at a hearing on an electric vehicle. Are electric vehicles beneficial to the economy and the environment? Happened just now. Enjoying hearing your thoughts. Please leave comments. Thanks.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Boebert from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Goffman, are the EPA's rules to regulate light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles economically feasible for middle class and hardworking American families living month to month and struggling with inflation?
Thank you for that question. It's a question that we take very seriously as well, and we've designed these rules to work hand in hand with the plans that we know that industry has to introduce and market clean
Mr. Goffman, what is the average price of a new combustion engine vehicle compared to the average price of a new electric vehicle?
I don't know the exact dollars. I know that today the EVs may be more expensive, but these rules.
So the average price of a traditional internal combustion engine was $45,600, while the average price of an electric vehicle was $61,800. And if these unfavorable rules are finalized, your own estimates that I've seen suggest 67% of all new cars sold in the U.S. will need to be fully electric by 2032. Now, how much did the average price of an electric vehicle increase by last year?
I don't know, but
So it's 22%.
Okay.
From May of 2022 to May of 2023, it's increased 22%. So it's not going down in price with these electric vehicles. We're seeing an increase, and by your own estimates, the technological costs of this proposal could reach $280 billion. That's increasing manufacturing costs by $1,200 per vehicle. Mr. Goffman, are you aware that in temperatures under 20 degrees Fahrenheit, electric vehicles lose nearly half of their charge in their batteries?
yes.
Yes. So in Colorado, where we rely on four-wheel drive vehicles to get around in winter, many of these vehicles will be regulated out of existence under these proposed rules. How much does an electric vehicle battery cost to replace?
I don't know offhand, but you're putting your finger on important issues, which is exactly why the strategy reflected in these rules is to give industry years of lead time.
Well, you're regulating an industry out of existence here, and we're seeing that it's less reliable. In Colorado, it's very common to have temperatures under 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and these batteries will lose some of their charge. Now, I have between $5,000 and $20,000 to replace an electric vehicle's batteries. And prolonged exposure to temperatures under 20 degrees can also compromise the electric vehicle's battery performance as much as 41%. Now, how do you recommend that hardworking families who are struggling to get by absorb these additional costs associated with electric vehicles?
Well, our projection is that by the time these rules go into effect, both the industry and investments like those made in the IRA and
so we're just going to print more money to make up for that. So, I mean, we're seeing a 22% increase in 1 year for the cost of electric vehicles. Even the tires on an electric vehicle wear 20% faster. I don't think that the average American taxpayer is looking for another federal government bailout for tires. I mean, over half of Americans have less than $1,000 in their savings account, and you're wanting them to spend more money on vehicles where the price is increasing, be at 41% higher at risk for having to change out a battery, tires that wear 20% faster than your average car. Now, please name two domestic mines that you support, Mr. Goffman, and that are critical to helping produce the amount of minerals necessary for the electric vehicles you've been praising today.
Well, the information I have is that in just under a year since the IRA was passed, 75 new facilities have been started to—
Domestic mines?
Including domestic mining.
Can you name any? that you support?
Not offhand. I'd be happy to get behind.
So the Rosemont mine and the Resolution Copper mine are two mines in Arizona blocked by the environmental extremists and the federal bureaucrats that would produce massive amounts of copper in the United States. The Biden administration has also blocked the Twin Metals mine in northern Minnesota, and Democrats on the Natural Resources Committee oppose all domestic mining. And if we don't mine for these minerals necessary, where are they going to come from? The 40,000 children mining for cobalt in the Congo with their bare hands in these China-owned mines, and then we buy these products from China and somehow feel virtuous about ourselves while they're building some 200 coal-fired energy plants. These rules do not benefit the hardworking Americans that I represent, and I hope that you would reconsider them and the costs that the American family is going to have to absorb because of them. My time has expired and I yield.
Chair recognizes Ms. Stensbury from New Mexico.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to hold yet another hearing on electric vehicles, and a delight to have the second opportunity to have the exact same hearing we had a couple of weeks ago. This definitely seems to be becoming a habit of the Oversight Committee. When the majority doesn't get the answers that they want, they just have the hearing again and then beat up another witness. And I do want to just say thank you, Mr. Goffman, for being here this morning. The EPA is always a popular punching bag of our friends on the other side of the aisle, and we all know the devastating impact that the Trump administration had on the EPA and especially the morale of all of our federal employees. So I want to thank you and all of our EPA employees who are sitting here with us today, and all of them who are serving across the country to protect our environment, because we know that you're doing the work of the American people. We know that you're doing the work that the American people elected us in this body to do, which is to protect clean air, to protect clean water, and to ensure that all of our families have a livable planet for generations to come. So, we're here today to talk about climate change, to talk about this vehicle rule, and to talk about the actions that the federal government is taking to invest in the private sector and the public sector to make sure that we address this existential and catastrophic threat to all of humanity across the planet. And, one of the reasons why I welcome the opportunity to have this hearing again is that it gives us another opportunity to highlight the important work that this Congress, last Congress, passed in passing the most significant climate legislation ever in the history of the planet, and that is the Inflation Reduction Act, and the work that the Biden administration is doing through our federal agencies to carry out the mandates that are in the Clean Air Act, that are in the Clean Water Act, and in the Inflation Reduction and bipartisan infrastructure laws to actually address our carbon emissions. And I think one of the things that folks really need to understand is that if we are going to address our carbon emissions and prevent a catastrophic climate calamity from affecting every single community on this planet, we have to do it sector by sector. We have to address it in the grid. We have to address it in domestic energy security. We have to address it through building materials. And that's exactly what the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act do. And in particular, we have to address it in the transportation sector, because transportation makes up about 29% of our emissions here in the United States. Now, there was some comments made earlier about EPA overstepping its authority in terms of setting out emission standards under the Clean Air Act. And while there was an unprecedented gutting of federal authority by a political Supreme Court a few weeks ago in Sackett and in a previous Clean Air Act decision, we all know, those of us who've worked in environmental policy, myself included, that the intent of Congress when they passed the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act was to protect American citizens, to protect our air, to protect our water, and that they intended, in a bipartisan basis, when both of those bills passed in Congress, and in the case of the Clean Water Act, were signed by a Republican president, to ensure that the American people would have a livable, breathable, drinkable, clean planet for future generations. And so it is just patently false that the EPA has overstepped their authority. Now, with respect to this current rule, this is really about addressing that slice of the pie in the transportation sector. And so, Mr. Goffman, I wonder if you could just take one moment to please explain the significance of why we have to address it in the transportation sector and how this feeds into our overall efforts to combat climate change here in the U.S.
Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman, for doing as good a job as I've ever heard anybody do in laying out the entire vision of what it will take to address not just climate change, but public health and air quality. In your question, you provided exactly the context for these rules, which are but one of several pillars on which a new car, clean car fleet of on-highway vehicles is being built. What this set of proposals will do is work in an integrated way with the investments made by the Inflation Reduction Act and in the bipartisan infrastructure law, in the whole range of innovations and deployments of technologies that will allow us to travel on road, delivering freight and transporting passengers in a way that significantly reduces pollutants like CO2. We project that these proposals, if enacted, would achieve close to, or certainly in excess of 9 billion tons of CO2 reduced, which is close to twice 2020.
Sorry, General Lee's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just say, once again, thank you. This is a critical piece in fighting climate change, and we appreciate your service.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Happen Just Now for more content about accountability of all public officials and policy and procedures.